Hi everyone. So in this video we're going to go through a tool Rhino.Inside. It's a really cool and powerful new tool that's been put up by McNeil, who are the makers of Rhino. And it is basically an interoperability tool that allows you to run Rhino inside of Revit. Um, it is very new. I mean, McNeil's been working on it for a while, but it's kind of now starting to kind of pick up and be really workable, and they've started to get through a lot of the bugs. Um, so it's still a work in progress though. So there are going to be, I have just playing around with it the last week or so. I've run into some little bugs here and there, but for the most part, it's really good. Um, and I'm sure it's going to continue to evolve. So a lot of the things that you'll see in this video could potentially, um, you know, be changing in the upcoming months and years or whatever. But anyway, I'm recording this in October 2019, so just keep that in mind that it's still a fairly new tool. Um, and in previous tutorials, we've looked at some other interoperability tools like Hummingbird and Rhino. And this has an advantage over those in that you kind of get the best of both worlds, in that you get all the sort of geometry library and everything that's really great about Grasshopper and Rhino, um, alongside kind of the direct access into Revit elements and things like that, which you can get from Dynamo. So you're kind of getting the best of both worlds in a sense. Um, so I'll also McNeil posted a few videos a few weeks ago, or even more recently than that, on their YouTube page that kind of give a little bit more introductory, kind of little broken down chunks of introductions to a lot of the tools and stuff. So definitely recommend checking that out as well. And I'll post some links. I'll post these links in the description below as well. All right, so let's just jump into it. So once you install it, you'll have this Rhino button here under your add-ins, and when you click that, it'll essentially open up this Rhino tab. Um, and once you click that, you will have Rhinoceros running inside of Revit. So now we have an instance of Rhino inside of Revit, and you can launch Grasshopper as well. So I've pre-baked a few things in here. I actually got this from the Rhino has like their own GitHub where they've been posting some of the scripts for their other tutorials. These are just a couple of things that will allow you to bring in Revit geometry into Rhino. In this case, it's like more of a one-way street where it's essentially kind of the same thing as if you were to export it from Revit. So it's not necessarily something that you couldn't do before, but it kind of just makes it a lot easier and smoother, so you can kind of bring in your objects by category. So for example, in this case, um, I'm just gonna, once you click this button, it'll kind of start to draw the floors inside of Rhino. Or if I wanted the walls as well, it'll do that. It's kind of fun. You get to watch it make all the walls. And it kind of, the script is just set up so that it's pretty neat in terms of um, it'll put everything on its own layer. So if you want, you can kind of set that up like that. Maybe I might just turn off walls for now for the purposes of this demo. Um, all right, so that's just kind of to show that sort of quickly show Revit into Rhino. Majority of this video will kind of be going through building up something inside of Rhino and then bringing it into Revit, because that's probably a more common workflow. So this is the Revit tab that you'll get inside of Grasshopper once you install the tools. There's obviously a lot of stuff here. We're not going to cover it all. But I just want to show a few of the main things. So, this kind of goes through some of the components and types of elements that you can build. So if we were to kind of quickly take a look at something like the add wall by curve, um, you'll see all the inputs that it's looking for. So let's just come into Grasshopper and maybe we'll draw. I'm just gonna draw like a zigzagging wall or something, just to demonstrate it. Oh, oops. You'll have to explode your curve into segments, and you also you can only still uh, you can in Revit when you're drawing walls. You're still you can't bring splines in directly, so you'll have to work with like arcs or polylines. Um, so these would be the curves. I'm gonna connect everything else before I connect the curves actually. So type. So it's basically looking for the wall type that I need. So you can do this document element types. Um, and then this will basically be grabbing all the element types in the model in the current document. If you right click on a lot of these tools will have this option to right click, and then there's this connect, and you can kind of it'll give you a drop down of some of the common things that you might want to connect. I'm going to use this value set picker. It's going to give me all the element types that are in the model, and I can go through and find the wall type that I want. Just so that I don't have to scroll through all that, I might want to just say if I know I want to use like a basic 12-inch wall, or sorry, it's not, it's a, I think Revit calls it a generic 12-inch. I can do that, and then this way that will just help prevent me from scrolling. Alright, so I'll plug that into the type. And there's a levels picker, I think, something like that. Here, document levels picker. And then you can also have this display as a drop down or a checklist or value sequence. I'm just going to do a drop down so it doesn't take up so much space in my canvas. I'm just going to draw out here on the, I think it's level 3, that courtyard space. I'll need a Boolean toggle for some of these. I'll say it's structural. I'll make the height 10. I'm just doing this really quick just to kind of demonstrate it. I'm going to go through something a little bit more complex in the next step. Location line, I'm going to leave that. I'm not really sure what, it's looking for an integer, but I'm not sure which integer is what location line. Anyway, I think this should be enough to get us what we need. So once I plug that in, you'll see it created those walls inside of Revit. So that's pretty cool. And what's also awesome is that if I were to move this in Rhino, it updates live inside of Revit. So that's one of the things, one of many things that is really cool about this compared to some of the other interoperability tools where you kind of have to export or import files that are kind of static. Looks like I also might want to plug in the toggle for the allowed joins here, so I'm just going to use this one, and you'll see that updated so that my walls are joined. And the cool thing again is that it didn't create new walls, it just updated the ones that were there before. Alright, so just wanted to kind of show that before jumping into something a little bit more fun. I'm just gonna disable that and delete these to unpin it. Oh, alright, here we go. Okay. So let's do, so a lot of what we've done in previous tutorials has worked with adaptive components and things like that. So I figured it would be good to go through an example of doing something with adaptive components inside of this, inside of Rhino.Inside. Alright, so let's see. So there is an adaptive component by add adaptive component by points component. So we can take a look at that. Um, Actually, before I do that, I want to just show something, another tool real quick. So actually, just to save some time so you guys aren't watching me draw too many lines in this video, I created a couple curves here that I'm going to loft. So I'm going to select these curves. I'm just going to loft them inside of Grasshopper. So just getting this kind of swooping roof thing on top of that courtyard. And so there is another thing I just want to show that is somewhat useful is there's this add direct shape by geometry. So this is kind of cool in that it's flexible. You can kind of create um, a direct shape and assign it whatever category you want. So it's nice for kind of more conceptual as you're doing like a concept model and you're massing things out potentially to use direct shapes. So if I have this, actually I'm going to assign a category first. So I could do, I think there's a categories picker or something. Here, model categories picker. So if I wanted to say this was, say, a roof, I can go down and find roofs. And I guess I can give it a name. I'll just call it canopy. And so this adds basically kind of like a massing object, like a direct shape that's in the category of roofs inside of Revit. So that's good if you just kind of need some sort of free-form surface in there. Although it is just somewhat limiting in terms of what you can actually do with it inside of Revit. So let's actually do this form, but let's place adaptive components on it and make something like a panelized roof structure. So I'm just gonna, I'll just delete this. Alright, so you'll see here that we need points and a type. So it's actually fairly straightforward, but to get there we're gonna do a bunch of steps first. So this is the loft that we have. I'm just gonna use one of the adaptive components that we've used in a previous tutorial, which is kind of just a quad panel with an opening in the middle. And so I need 4 points, so I need to kind of break this up into a quad grid. I'm gonna just use, there's a lunchbox. This component is from the lunchbox plugin. It's called quad panels. You don't have to do it this way. We've done in previous tutorials ways without going through another plugin, but this is kind of a quick and easy way to do that. So I'll just set my U and V divisions. Maybe I'll do something a little bit larger just so it goes a little bit faster. Let's see. Maybe something like that. Okay, so one thing you'll notice I have a second screen that's not being recorded. One thing that is really useful when you're using this tool is to have 2 screens or a really wide screen, because obviously As you can tell, it gets a little bit tricky to work um, with all these windows open. So anyway, we have that, so we can um, deconstruct the B-rep to get our vertices, and this essentially gives us the 4 corner points that we'll need. So we have our points. So you see here, those are the 4 points for the adaptive component, and they're already kind of broken up into a grafted list, which is good. And so now we need to get at an element type. So I think I can probably just use this again, I think. I'm just going to copy and paste this. And in this case, I think it had, let me see if I named it with the word adaptive in it. I'll just scroll down and find it. I think it's under generic models. Here, okay. So this will be the type. And let's see. I think that should be all we need. Okay, so we have all of the, okay, so these are flipped, so I'm just going to flip them inside of Revit rather than trying to rebuild it. Okay, so those are these adaptive panels, and if I click on it, you can kind of see that it has, we had used some of these parameters before in some other tutorials, the aperture size and the panel depth and things like that. So the nice thing about this tool now is that we can actually control the, we can get and set parameters inside of Grasshopper, which is something that wasn't really possible with any of the other tools that we've looked at in the past. We always had to do that through Dynamo. So if we want to, so just to take kind of a look, there's this element parameter get. So if we were to say element, and we want to get, say, aperture size, so that'll go, I mean, in this case, they're all they're all the same. So, but just to kind of show that you can get parameters inside of Grasshopper, which is pretty cool. So let's do one more thing in this kind of step. In this step, we'll do a set parameter. Where is it? Parameter set. Okay. All right. So these will be our components. This is the element, our parameter key. I just deleted it. Adaptive, or sorry, aperture size. So that'll be our parameter key. And then our value. So let's do something where we're actually kind of grabbing something that's not completely random. So if we were to take all these panels, let's say, for example, and get the centroids of them, and then we'll get we'll deconstruct the point and grab the z value. So just to kind of show what I'm doing visually, we're kind of grabbing the center point on each of these panels before they've been kind of turned into these components. And I'm just grabbing the centroid of that, and I'm deconstructing it, and I'm basically just going to control the aperture size based on the height. So I'm going to get the Z, and so from there I can um, get the bounds essentially. Oops. So my smallest is 31-ish, and then to 127. So these are just, the height in feet. Um, and then I'll construct a domain. So this is what I'm doing now is I want to basically be able to get, right now the default for all these apertures is 3 feet. And I want that to be something that's variable. So I want that to vary. Let's say I'm just going to make up kind of a range, roughly half a foot to, let's say, maybe 8 feet. 8 might be a little large, but we can always adjust it. Alright, so that's the domain, and then we're going to remap. So our values are going to be all the Z heights, our domain source and target. So the target is going to be this domain, and the source will be the min and max. And let's just make sure that that gives me what I want. So we should see everything, yeah, so everything should be between 0.5 and 8. Okay, cool. So we have those values now. So now we'll have to make sure though that as these this data is all kind of the same structuring in terms of its nesting. So these are all in their own list. So I'm just going to graft these so that each of these heights is in its own list. So these will be the parameter values. And so now we'll be able to control the openings. So now it's just going, it's processing all that change. If we come back here into Revit, you see now that all these, we kind of have this splaying of the aperture size as we go up higher. So that's kind of just a cool way to be able to manipulate, that we could have done this whole process going back and forth between, Grasshopper and Dynamo. And, in this case, you probably could have done all this in Dynamo. But just to show the overall process of how you might use Rhino.Inside and some of the neat features that are kind of embedded in the tool itself. So I think that'll be it. Hope you were able to kind of get a good overview of the tools and what it is able to do. And I definitely recommend taking a stab at this if you are looking to do some interoperability between Rhino and Revit. Alright, thanks.